Welcome to the Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show, we'll have a talk about a Linux project or around topics about something in the Linux or open source world. It could be a Linux distribution, desktop environment or application. We also discuss the news and take topics from anywhere around the world for an enjoyable chat. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project. And with me today, I got Sravan, Dan Kelly, Colin, the Vashinator, Ben, the Mr. Storm OS man himself, John Anderson, and Thomas, who just skated in right as I went live. Or I guess I was live, but right as I, flipped it over. Welcome, everybody. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Don't talk all at once.
Yeah, let's not do
Trying
that.
to find them. Trying to find the unmute button.
Oh, okay. Well, it's okay. I mute you if I feel like it. So you have to mute yourself. On the docket for today, we are going to be talking about open source games that we explored in Flathub. We're going to check what's on the menu for next week. A news flight, if there is a little time, a community free pour, and last call. So to kick this off, what have you been doing in tech? So, Colin, you said you just uploaded a video. Is this something you want to talk to us about? Something exciting?
It's one of Ben's distros. Ben contacted me and asked me to check it out. Storm D, based on Debian, whereas Storm OS is based on Arch. So just thought I'd put it out there for Ben and have a bit of a look around at it, and looks quite promising distro. There's a few little issues here and there, little niggles, but it's not released as in it's on a website or anything at the moment. The question I suppose I have for Ben is that the name of it Storm D, or is that just an interim name? Is it going to have its own source for each page? The initial name, okay.
Yeah, it's the official name. What sparked it was there was a couple of other Debian distros out there. Not going to go into any names because
there's hundreds of them.
There's a dozen of them. You're right, Dan. But I wanted to
at least 3 or 4.
That many. Yeah, there's a lot, but I wanted to give something a little bit more familiar and a little bit more, I guess, stable in the distro community, and give my own take on Debian that was a little bit unique. And I felt, what the hey, might as well bring something to the table that's like I said, slightly older but still familiar. So I said, what the heck, let's do Debian. So
I wanted to ask. Oh, sorry. Yep. Who was that?
Oh, you're fine. So yeah, hence the birth of Storm D, and minus those few quirks that was listed in Colin's video and a couple of other guys, the only thing that really is left in development is to work out the dock. I mean, those are just icons that people can rearrange the way they want. Yes, it's lightweight when you're on HTOP on it, stuff like that. It uses Calamares to install it, or you can boot into the installer mode directly off the live USB or ISO or whatever, and install it the traditional Debian way if you want to do that. So, yeah. Now, when he looked at it and a couple of other guys, they noticed that Plank was loading a little slow. Now, that I can't really do much about because that's a Plank thing. So maybe they'll fix that in the future. I don't know. But, I can't really attest to that. But and also about the XFC wallpaper bug, Leviticus suggested that I copy the stuff from Etsy Skell. And, well, the script that I used came from our good buddy Esnix. Kudos to him. And all I did was tweak it to my own liking, stuff like that. So he does pull in from Etsy Skell from what I saw. And so that is not a problem. However, some reason the wallpapers still don't pop up by default. Now I did place them in user shared backgrounds, which I did migrate over. Still doesn't work, so that's just something I always seem to run into no matter what. So, I did everything right, but for some reason it still doesn't pull over. So I don't know, but I'm not going to pay it too much attention because people are going to pick their own wallpaper anyway. So I just said I'm going to leave it.
So what is
had a
the
question?
what is the unique thing about Storm D that we call it Storm D?
Yeah.
Storm D, yep.
What like Storm Debian? What is the Storm Debbie? What is the
Storm D,
is like a key focal reason for why somebody should try Storm
That.
D? What's
Well,
the elevator pitch?
The elevator pitch to this is Debian is not, until recently, they have the non-free firmware ISOs. I get it. But the thing is, not only does this come with a lot of pre-installed stuff, that sort of thing, this is my take on giving people an out-of-the-box XFCE version with a lot of stuff pre-installed, but not too much. So it's kind of a competitor to StormOS Arch Edition, just in a Debian sense, pretty much. And if people want a complete ready-to-roll Debian, here you go. That's the way to look at this.
And also, I could add to that, it's got the utilities program, so it has a lot of options of installing certain applications and other things that you like list hardware and things like that. So it makes it easier for new users to figure out what they can do.
Exactly. That's what I was about to go into, Colin. Was
that? Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're
Ben.
fine, but yeah, this is Debian purely for users who just want something where they can get up and go, or for new users who are moving over from Mac or Windows, and they want something where they don't have to go through a dozen hoops just to install Debian. So yeah, this is kind of what StormOS is for Arch, but Storm D is for Debian, pretty much. So again, it's something where people don't have to figure out a bunch of crap just to install Debian.
Yeah, Debian is kind of a rocky ride from the net installer to install it.
Yeah, or even
if you're somewhat seasoned and done a few Ubuntu's and some others, you can figure it out. But right out of the box, it's kind of spooky.
It's kind of a pain in the neck. Yeah. And that's kind of why I made this, was to sort of help those people who don't want to have to sit down at a computer for hours on end to figure out Debian.
Well, I've heard on the grapevine, or actually where have I read it somewhere, about Debian. The Debian developers sitting down to make some choices regarding Debian in regards to the free and non-free. So they're looking at possibly adding options as a non-free or a free, so people can have all those extra drivers that they need. I think there's a few options that they're throwing around for that, which is quite interesting, because I think we're at the point where I think they should do that, because there's a lot more people jumping on board of Linux. I think they need to make it a little bit easier for people. So it's good to hear that.
Yes. Now, I think that, that is a good thing. I won't argue that. But this is just, a distro that I decided to make Debian, again, a little bit more easy for those who want to try out Debian. So, yeah.
Yep.
So that I thank you, Colin, for doing that video for us and getting Storm D a little bit off the ground. So,
you're welcome, mate. No worries.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I watched it too.
Well, I really like how this was Colin's segment and Ben kind of hijacked it. So well done, Ben.
Sorry.
No, I'd rather let him talk. He knows all about it more than me, to be honest.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's all good.
And these distros are a labor of love, and any mainstream acceptance of them is more than welcome. And
they are a lot of work.
So, Colin, I guess you're mainstream?
I'm mainstream.
Apparently, according to Ben,
God.
Mainstream acceptance. So,
well, I mean, it's a rock and roll term that I use all the time for most things. So I figured I'd put it in this contrast as well.
Well, Colin, if you are mainstream, that would make me lame stream. So there we go.
I think it's pretty cool. No criticism at all, but I wonder just how many distributions have started to make Debian easier.
Well, that
years.
is a good question, John. Well, I will say that, not to put any other flavors of Debian respins down, but I think that coming from the main developer myself, that, I've done a job, and I hope that some people other than Colin and Backyard Tech and Jack Kafer will look at this and do some videos on them, because I'm doing this a lot. I'm outside out of my schoolwork and etc. So hopefully, we can get more like this on this program even too.
I'll definitely check it out. It looks
yeah, man. Well, that would be great, because I would hope that a lot of the guys here will do that, and I will look forward to seeing what you guys have to say in Telegram.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much. Colin, do you have a link to that video that you could share?
Oh, and just a moment. I'll grab it for you. You just want me to put in chat?
Hey, put it in chat, or put it in the chat, or someplace.
Yeah, in the YouTube chat, yeah?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, sure, I'll do that.
I'll be right back, guys. I'm going to get a drink.
It's a saloon. We need drinks.
That sounds actually like a really good idea, to go grab a beverage.
That's why the show started late for me. So,
okay.
Bill, welcome.
Hi, Nate.
Your audio level's great.
Thank you.
Super great to see you again. Obviously, you're in an outdoor setting. It looks like are you by a campfire?
I am by a fire here in my fire pit.
Oh, nice.
And the person that you see across from me is David. Say hello, David.
Hello.
David is an international student who used to live with us many years ago.
I think I remember David.
Yes, he is he's a computer science major at Syracuse and an advocate of open source and Linux. So he decided to come home for a weekend. So we're enjoying a nice evening outside, and we're going to be roasting some s'mores while hanging out in the Linux Saloon this evening.
Excellent. So feel free to pass them through the phone if you can. I don't know what's going to do.
I'll be glad. Does anybody in the Linux Saloon tonight want a s'more? I will be happy to pass one over to you through the Zoom chat.
Can you please explain what a s'more is?
Oh, yeah, I guess
I would be glad to all of my friends. S'mores are to the U.S. is what Vegemite is to our Australian friends. As a staple food, although it is a little bit more sweet than Vegemite, but pungent. It consists of a marshmallow between 2 layers of chocolate, between 2 layers of graham cracker.
Oh, you do 2 layers of chocolate. Wow, that must be like an East Coast.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it is a little mad, but it is one of the desserts here. And considering that it's a nice evening of about maybe 16 to 17 degrees Celsius, that it's worth sitting outside at the campfire and celebrating David being home. We're going to enjoy a nice American classic campfire dessert. I told David about Linux Saloon and told him he should join more often, because it is a great general use Linux user group consisting of people from all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Even parts of the world unknown to most, Australia.
Exactly. Actually, all things considered, there's a guy who melts metal, a YouTube channel that I follow out of Australia, and he gets he takes like copper scrap or aluminum scrap, and he melts it down into coins or ingots, and makes some really neat stuff. So much love to our friends down under.
Absolutely. And Colin, I don't know if you knew this, Bill, but Colin, he's actually a kangaroo fighter.
We thought that one of my technicians went to Australia for 2 weeks to see a family member's wedding, and we took bets when he came back whether he would be a kangaroo fighter, the next iteration Crocodile Dundee, whether he was even coming back at all, or whether he was going to say, "Oh, crikey," when he came back to the office. He did none of those things, so I am out $50 as a result.
Well, these things happen.
These things happen, he says.
All right, before we get too far off the trail, Sravan, are you still there? You're hiding out, maybe?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. So you've been working on a thing Bash scripting with options. And what do you mean by with options?
So for example, you have a bash script, you want to send some parameters from command line, like you do in many command line utilities. So for example, you have something like natescript.sh, and you want to pass like simple commands like -p for like maybe say partition or -d for device or whatever. And you can have like simple options.
-L for late.
Huh?
The -L for late.
Yeah, anything. So like -L, so you can pass another argument for it. For example, -p Raspberry Pi or whatever, -d dev.sta. Like you can pass like different options, and then you can easily parse it using a while. So yeah, you can just use like simple, like instead of writing complex if statements in Bash, you can just use like a while loop to go parse through all the options, and then you can make a simple Bash script. So instead of setting variables manually in Bash variables, you can just pass them to your Bash script. It's very
That's
simple.
very cool.
I think I posted some links in the document
You
for
did.
people who want to read, but if you want to go do more like, if you want to write your own Bash scripts, want to do some detailed Bash scripting, so this is an easy way to pass options to your script. Instead of changing variables every single time you want to change something inside your script, this is an easier way to pass arguments inside your Bash script.
Yeah, that's super
the
cool.
command is called getops. So you can just say like a while getops loop, and you can have like cases. So for example, you have L option. You can have a case for that L option, like passing in either reading what the user gives in or passing it like true or false or whatever. Like it's very flexible and very simple. Yeah, I'm doing some Bash scripts to automate some of my image building process. So I thought I was exploring different ways to make it like simple so that I don't need to write like 100 lines of Bash to achieve like pass through arguments to cover various cases. So this is simple because if you pass in wrong options, I have a loop which like throws an error so that the script doesn't run. So if you pass in wrong options or wrong arguments, like even both options or arguments, if you pass anything wrong, you can just in the while loop, you can just make it like go out so that your script doesn't run. So there are like fail safes in this. So it's somewhat easier than writing again hundreds of lines to do the same thing. It's inbuilt in Bash, so it's called getops.
Very cool. So are you talking about this on your blog at all?
Not really. I think I've sent some links which basically cover the use case. So again, I don't think I can add anything on my own for it. So I've been using the examples what I found online to modify them in my own script. So I don't think I have anything to add there.
Okay, fair enough. And are you implementing these now? Like, are they already something you're using
Yes.
for
Yes.
installing? Probably, I'm assuming an ARM-based EndeavourOS.
So I use it for building EndeavourOS ARM images and uploading them to GitHub. So I have two different scripts, one for building and one for releasing them on GitHub. So
Oh, very nice.
first I made this work for the GitHub release script. So I use GitHub CLI to push releases onto GitHub. So first I made this for that, and then I used it because it was a simpler script. Again, then I implemented this for building images. So for example, I want to like choose a platform for building the image, for example, Raspberry Pi or Odroid. So I can just send in like -p rpi for Raspberry Pi. So the script will automatically pick up that it's Raspberry Pi, and it will choose packages for Raspberry Pi. So that's a simple example. So if you have several arguments, so before what I used to do is select it, like input it manually, but doing it manually every single time gets like annoying. So now I can just pass in whatever arguments I want, and it's a single line command now. So that's what is good. You can just keep on adding arguments. Yeah, it makes life easier.
Well, that's excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing those links, those resources. I'll definitely include those in the show description when I distill this down to what I release after the fact. Adam, welcome. Hopefully your microphone's working tip top.
Yeah, here's open.
Oh, here's hoping. Yep, sound great.
Well,
All right.
the mic's working at least.
Oh, the self-deprecating humor. Well, welcome. So Eris did a straw poll in Telegram and Matrix. The poll was, how is the Flathub game exploration going? In Telegram, 15% said it's going great, 20% said it's going okay, 10% not having a great time with it, 35% said not interested, 10% said I'm unable to, and 10% said not interested in doing this at all. And Matrix at 25% said it's going okay, 25% said not interested in this exploration, another quarter saying I'm not able to do this exploration, and another quarter saying not interested in doing the explorations in general. So there we go. So I thought I'd kick this out there, see how this this video would do, how audience response would be. But the idea is to explore some open source games. There's a lot of stuff out there. I started digging around on Flatpak, and I was very fascinated by some of the titles and so forth. I thought we'd do an exploration of just, pick a game that interests you. We need something more catchy than game exploration. I think that sounds kind of dumb, but exploring games in Flathub. And so I want to see how this kind of went for everybody. I'll kick it off. I explored a game called Tuxemon. So I've been, this is a secret, so don't tell anybody, but I've been playing some of the old Pokemon games, like from the Game Boy Advanced era, just because my kids are into Pokemon. I just want to understand it from its origins, from, I guess, the 90s and into the early 2000s. And so it's been kind of fun, playing it with my kids, although I've been playing quite a bit on my Steam Deck. And it's been nice because I can just pick it up, play it, put it down, whatever, and and so forth. I'd never had a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance growing up, so it's kind of the idea of a mobile game thing is kind of new to me. But anyway, I see this game called Tuxemon, and I think it's kind of fascinating because essentially what they did was they took the same kind of JRPG type of game, put their own open source spin on it. So it's powered by Python. It's all in the Creative Commons and open source. Some of the things that they talk about that you can do is this multiplayer, battle your friends in an online world. I didn't do that because I have no friends in the online world. They have these things called fusions where you create new, unique creatures by combining monsters together. You can use your phone or tablet or gamepad, whatever you want to do. It's actually in an alpha stage, so like a pre-alpha stage. So not everything's working in it, and some features are not fully implemented. But I did get to play around in it quite a bit, and it is of that Game Boy Advance era pixel art, and I thought it was just a lot of fun to play. The dialogue in it's very cheeky and funny, and it's definitely a work in progress, like I think many open source games are. But it was still fun, and my oldest, I think he probably played it for a few hours until he kept, he had to have issues here and there with the game crashing or whatever. But he thought it was pretty cool too. So I say it's fun. Maybe not ready yet for everybody to try, but it's certainly, if you are maybe like an enthusiast or want to create something too, you can join their team. They have a community section and whatnot. But did anybody else happen to try Tuxemon? No.
I'm just looking at it now. It looks pretty rad.
Yeah, I think it looks pretty rad.
Yeah, I just looked at it. It looks like Game Boy Advance era Pokemon.
Yep, exactly.
Like not the ones before it, not the ones after it, but exactly the Game Boy Advance ones, like Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green, Sapphire. Mm-hmm. It gives up that vibe, and the monster names are funny.
They are.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So, even if you haven't played it, what do you think of people creating a game like this? You think it's going to go anywhere? Or do you think it's just going to be one of those ongoing kind of slow churning projects?
Specifically Tuxemon, or?
Yeah, Tuxemon. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's legs to that. There's another game. It's not free and open source, but it's called Temtem. It just recently had like a 1.0 release. Similar idea, like the Pokemon style game, the monster catching JRPG kind of game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that like people like that formula, and maybe I've heard a lot of criticism of kind of where the Pokemon company / Game Freak has taken the Pokemon series, and I think people really want that kind of return to form. So yeah, I mean this could definitely have, and I mean if you make it free and open source, and if enough people know about it, maybe some silly YouTuber with a "What's up, it's your boy" intro, they might like it, and then everybody would be like, "Hey, this looks cool. This is free. Let's do this."
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it has legs.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adam. Like Pokemon is what you call bloat right now. So if you have something simpler, like I stopped following the names when it was like 7th generation or whatever. Like they seem to be like adding more and more and more stuff and making the games more feature-ish. So it's becoming slower. So having something simpler might be a good alternative. Again, that's why I'm saying that this looks like the Game Boy Advance era. I think that was when Pokemon was the best.
Yeah.
So another game somebody tried here. I did not. Space Cadet Pinball. Who did Space Cadet Pinball? Colin. That seems like a perfect game for you. Space Cadet Pinball.
I'll just tell you one thing. I'll give you a figure: 9,765,750. Right?
That's impressive.
Yeah, I still got it.
That's
That is impressive. Yeah. So it's reverse engineered?
It's reverse engineered. Apparently, that's what it says on the Flathub site. It says it's reverse engineered from Windows, because I used to play that quite regular in Windows when it was on. I don't know if it's still on Windows now.
It was XP, yeah.
Yeah, XP, that's right, yeah. And I had a lot of fun. And the only problem was I kept hitting my super key, which opened up the activities view. And I'm thinking, oh no, where's the ball gone? But I think it pauses when you do that. So I was sort of like, I've never had so many problems trying to hit that super key again, try and get it back. It was like an absolute panic. But yeah, I was having a lot of fun.
I almost feel like a pinball game like that would be great with a controller with like the triggers on it. For the flippers.
Yeah.
That might be especially
something you can just really whack.
Right.
Nate, you just gave me a great idea. So I just got a Steam Deck.
Oh.
And you mentioned pinball. I was thinking those finger flippers in the bottom would be great flippers for a Steam pinball game.
Absolutely. Can you install flat packs on that?
You sure can.
All right, so
yeah, right. Oh, there you go.
I have a Dell WD-19 USB 3 dock down in my office that I connect my laptop to, and I thought, okay, let's connect the Steam Deck to this and see what happens. I switched it to desktop mode, and lo and behold, I had 4 monitors worth of KDE Plasma desktop. I was able to install anything I wanted on it, which is fantastic. So I would imagine you'd have no problem installing what you want.
So I think it'd be really cool if you could get the game to work in like Tate mode, like you turn the Steam Deck, vertically, so you have like the table rather than like horizontal.
That's a neat idea. I don't know how you hold it though.
Back and forth, yeah.
How we used to like play like shooter arcade games. You'd like turn your TV on its side and get like the vertical.
So you have these buttons here. I suppose you could do that, like almost like you could do that.
Yeah.
That'd be doable. That's a neat idea.
You guys just gave me a flashback to 23 years ago. In 1999, I had started the Cape Cod Linux Users Group, also known as CClug, and we were talking about how people are going to game in Linux. And look where we are now. We have a Linux-first device, thanks to Valve, that runs a full-blown Plasma desktop that you can install anything you want on. And here I am in a Linux user group talking about it. I'm sorry, it's a special moment. It just, the irony struck me.
It's all a dream. You'll wake up soon.
That's actually what I feel like. I'm gonna wake up and I'll be stuck into a Windows 98 machine.
Yeah.
I did turn so I turned my startup sound on my Windows 10 desktop at my office to the 98 sound, and I remember a young technician about 21 years of age coming in my office and after I had rebooted and saying, "That's kind of a neat sound. I've never heard that." I wept openly.
See, Nate, you're gonna wake up and you're gonna have like a cold sweat, and you're gonna hear your Cortana smart speaker ask you where you want to go today.
That sounds awful.
It's all over. Yeah.
I think I'd be a Luddite if I had to use that.
Like off into the woods I go.
That's right.
I don't know if you guys know this, but a little off topic, but OpenSUSE, the best distribution in the world.
Absolutely.
The release manager for Leap, a guy by the name of Lubach Coachman, recently packaged NSCDE, which for you old timers is the modern iteration of the common desktop environment, but he packaged it to OpenSUSE, released it factory via Tumbleweed. And if you run Tumbleweed, you can install NSCDE, which will bring you back to all of your retro days in a proper retro DE.
Like NS as in next step?
NS as in next series.
Okay.
I am guilty of running after step on old machines. It brings me a sense of happiness and nostalgia, and Window Maker as well. But no, this is actual like CDE, what you would have seen from like an UltraSpark 60 or
HP
really
Linux.
anything running Solaris 7. Yeah,
Some like
old
AIX or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. NSCDE, I think, was also what IRIX used for anybody that used SGI systems.
When I first used CDE, I was using Windows 98 at home at the time. I looked at it like, what is this magical thing that has these multiple desktop or virtual desktops? I thought it was just the absolute most fantastic thing I'd ever used. So yeah, I think I have to give that a whirl. All right, so back to Space Cadet Pinball. Colin, how long did you actually play it? Was it for extended period of time? Was it just kind of a play a little bit, kind of got your laughs and then moved on?
Play a little bit here and there. That was about
Yeah.
it. Yeah, if I was taking a bit of a break, just have a bit of a play. I was trying to slap the keyboard. That's where I was hitting the super key all the time. Brought me back many days where you used to be on the pinball machine and you'd shake it around.
Yep.
It's quite good. Loved it.
I was just playing some pinball earlier today. Just a space shuttle pinball. I can't remember who did it, but it was a lot of fun to play. Like real pinball, you have to pull it back, and then fire it off.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I've got a mate back in Melbourne that's it's got a pinball machine. Yeah, fun to play.
Yeah, they are. I couldn't get the thing up the ramp though. I just couldn't do it. I need a few more quarters. Oh, cool. Is this something you're going to probably keep on your system, or is it going to be probably removed?
Yeah, no, I'll definitely keep it on there. But I don't know. I'm going on holidays. I'm going away for 3 weeks, so I don't know whether my arch will explode on me when I get back after 3 weeks, because I won't be updating my machine while I'm away. So yeah, I will see how we go.
Reboot into it and update.
No, I won't bother. I'll take the chance. Maybe I'm just looking for an excuse to distro hop. There we go. We all need an excuse to do that, don't we?
Yeah, sure. Except then I have to worry about my distro exploding on me because it's, an awesome distro. Well, I almost tried Space Cadet Pinball, and I went on to something else, which I'll talk about now. It's called Frog Squish. I was thinking it would be like Frogger. It's by this organization called Endless Studios. It's an isometric 3D Frogger style of game built on the Unity engine. And it's targeted toward kids, so that was perfect for me. And you basically just kind of go through, you get coins and see how long you can go. I never actually got to like an end of a thing. I don't know if it just keeps going on, if it's like procedurally generated or something like that. I think I got like 180 some odd points at the max. But it's a fun little game to play. The physics are decent. It's very simple. You just push up to go forward and left and right, whatever. I played it on the Steam Deck and I used the control pad there, but I had to use something called anti-micro. I think that's what it's called. It allows you to map your like a joystick to key presses or whatever, your D-pad, whatever you want the key presses. So, like, since the Steam Deck is a controller only style device, that's how I used it, and it was a lot of fun. It's a pretty simple, a simple style of game, and I can't imagine I'm gonna play it all that much, but I'll probably let the kids play it. They'll enjoy it. Anybody here play Frogger back in the day?
I did.
Was that on
I
one
thought
of those?
that Frog Squish was like that when I looked at it. I didn't know if it was anything close to it.
Yeah, not really. It's not the same kind of cutesy, with little tunes and whatnot. But it's
That used to be on an arcade game, is it? Frogger? Is that the one where it crosses the road, or is that the one?
Yeah, you hop your frog across the road to avoid cars.
That's right. Yeah, geez.
Adam, do you ever play childish games for children?
All the time. This is like half of who I am. What are you talking about?
Well, I know you play a lot of AAA style titles and whatnot.
I play everything, man. I was
okay.
I was just playing some Sonic 2 earlier on the Mega Drive Genesis thing. So
Oh, nice.
I'm all about it.
Yeah, this is definitely worth some plays, and it's if you need to like reset your mind for a little bit, this is not a bad game to play. Like just kind of have like a soft reboot, as it were, in the middle of the day. I think it's pretty decent. Yeah, the graphics are whimsical, and the gameplay also has whimsy. So it's.
I think anybody who can anybody who still has enough imagination to enjoy like an Atari 2600, everything's on the table at that point, right?
Right, and that's me.
Yeah, because it's like if I can just play a little square, but I'm having a good time,
I
think I can play anything.
Adventure, that's still one of my favorite games.
Yeah, or the Indiana Jones game.
Oh, yeah.
That one was
I liked E.T. I'm one of the few, like one of 3 people.
Yeah.
Do any of you gamers from the 90s remember the Marathon series?
On the Mac, yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually that game was released open source, known as LF1 or ALEPHONE, and they recreated that as a fully open source game. So Nate, I think to quantify your statement further about like open source games, I think we should look at games that used to be closed source that are now open source.
I like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of source ports. Sorry. There's a lot of source ports where like Quake 3 or the Doom 3 engine, like things like that. Obviously the original Doom engine that were originally proprietary software, but have since been open sourced or available as an open source version, right? And there's also recompilations out there too, like Super Mario 64. They decompiled that and like made another version of it and all that. So
Warzone 2100, I think, was another game, the real-time strategy from the late 90s.
Yeah, but in a way, like I don't know, I feel like it's more impressive for a developer to just come up with an open source thing by themselves and not just sort of wait on licensing changes or
Oh, sure.
Not that the effort is not there. Certainly, not like the people who did those things are incredible, but it's also like I don't know. In a world of everything's the same in gaming, it's kind of nice to see new things.
Do you guys remember in like 1999, or if you'd seen them on eBay, like the metal boxes that you could buy of like Myth 2 Soul Blighter
and Quake 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were those Loki games?
Yeah, that's who I was trying to think of. It was Loki Games that released those, and Myth 2 is actually a really good game.
Yeah. Well, you say that, but I'm gonna respectfully disagree with you there, but yeah.
No problem. No disrespect taken.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, so I think it's fun to see people create things. I'm always interested in knowing like what was their motivation to express themselves artistically in an open source game. Like I'd like to know what that was. Dan, what is the game that you tried?
Well, a Saloon just isn't complete without a billiards table. So what I had actually selected is Billiards GL. Okay, and this game is a flat pack and from the Flathub. I installed it on my machine here with a full-size 27-inch monitor, and the game opened up and worked fine. There's some niggles about it though that are kind of weird because you get I got the game. You can run the game simultaneously to stream. It runs that well. There's a training mode. The training mode, you select that from the main menu, and it gives you a tutorial with text across the top on how to work. It uses a few keys from the keyboard and your mouse. A majority of the keys outside of the space bar would be to help you walk around the table and get in line with your cue ball or move your cue ball if you're in a position in the game where you got the ball and you can put it where you want. It uses the insert, delete, up and down keys to help you get around. The mouse, you move the mouse around to walk around the table, so to speak, but it is kind of wonky. it's really hard to get used to because the mouse is not locked to the game. It's really easy to move your mouse pointer outside the game and open something else up in your computer. So that is kind of something that's way out there. It's got a setup menu for settings and stuff like that, but I couldn't really get any of the settings to lock in. For video, I'd set it to a video size, and it said you had to restart the game to get it to take, but it just went back to all its default stuff. But that was fine for what I was doing with it because it played good. And the resolution of the pool table and the balls and everything else look really great. I mean, the balls aren't square or nothing. They're nice round billiard balls.
Did you check to see when the last update was done on the game?
Well, I'm
looking at it and I'm smiling.
Yeah, it says updated July 14th, 2003. Wow. Yep. No one's looked at it since then.
I'm sure someone has done something.
Has billiards changed since 2003? Like, isn't that still the same game it's always been?
Okay, then it kind of feels like they started working on it and got it to work good enough and just didn't complete all the little niggles and stuff they, in the setup and stuff like that. Because there's there in the setup, there's an audio setting, the audio setting doesn't do nothing at all. You don't get no audio with this game. When you start the game up, though, it does ask you to pick a language. So that's important that they put that there. Other than using your mouse to walk around the table, which is really confusing to do. You have to actually work with it for a while to actually get used to how to use the mouse to walk around the table to take a shot at the cue ball. I did play the game for a while. I probably got like 3 hours into it, and I'm a pretty crummy pool table even at the saloon. So, I can see this game something where you could put it on your computer that's by your TV set in your living room, and if you have company over, have a small party or something, you could turn it on, and some of the guys could, it has a 2-player mode. The 2-player mode works great. It keeps track of the solids and the stripes and stuff like that.
That's pretty essential, yeah.
You can play 8 or 9 ball, but it's kind of a good game for that. You can have people playing Uno at one table and a couple of guys playing pool on the TV.
So it looks like 3 years ago is when the flat pack was created, and they edited the metadata and patches. So.
Mm-hmm. But it is a nice looking game. It does seem like it even at the resolution they left it at, that it is well suited. It's not all grainy and last century stuff.
No scan lines.
No scan lines.
No scan lines. No, sir.
No 640 by 480. It
Nothing
actually
wrong with that.
played good on a 1440p monitor.
Did it adjust to the monitor size?
Yes, it goes to window mode only, though.
Oh, okay. Well, very cool. And I guess you are right when you say, how can you not talk about billiards in a saloon, right?
Right. Put your money on the table and let's go.
Is this something you think you'll play again, or do you think you had your fill of it?
I don't have no reason to actually delete it off this machine. I did kind of enjoy playing with it. But when you're playing Cyberpunk 2077, especially with the new updates they just released, where do you spend your time?
Oh, sure. Right. I understand.
Now,
in all fairness, I keep a Windows 95 virtual machine on my computer, so every once in a while I can play that version of FreeCell. I don't know why I like that one in particular, but the one on Windows 95 is my favorite.
Right. It is a fully functional game. It does have some quirks and stuff like that. Like I said, working the mouse is the biggest thing with the game, to walk around the table, because you move the mouse to the right and it does one thing, and you push the button and it goes right and left. And I think you push the other mouse button and it makes you rotate. So as you're walking around the table, going down the edge of the table, you're holding I think it's the left mouse button in, but if you want to rotate around the corner, you got to hold the other button down, the left button, and then you can pan around the other around the corner of the table. It's kind of it took me a good hour or two just to get used to it and be patient with it.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad you tried that out. I got
It takes care of all the scratches and all the stuff like that. You can't cheat.
Can you hit the ball so hard it flies off the table?
No, and I've tried that because it's got 3 modes. When you have the ball, it's got view mode, so you can view the table and stuff like that. Then it's got aim mode, and then it takes and focuses down on your ball where you can use the arrow keys to shift around which direction you want to shoot your ball. Or you could use the mouse at that point to direct your cue ball. And then it's got shoot mode, which you hit the space bar again and it releases. Well, you don't hit it. Actually, what you do is you hold it down and there's a bar graph on the side. It's kind of a translucent white that goes up. The longer you hold it, the more power you're putting behind the cue until it gets to the top. So you can adjust the tension on your cue stick of how hard you want to whack the cue ball. But, I haven't knocked any balls off the table, but yeah, I've slammed them so hard they go everywhere all over the table by letting it go all the way to the top. But if you're looking for that trick shot where the ball's almost by the pocket, but not quite, and you want to get it aimed just right, use just a little bit of the space bar for tension on the stick or thrust, and you might get your ball in the pocket.
So you can't rip the felt and get disqualified?
That's the next update. It's coming in 2004.
Yeah. If you scratch the next player gets the ball in his hand, he gets put it on the table in the traditional billiards places behind the line.
Well, very cool. Well, thanks for sharing. Ben.
Well, this may or may not count, but one game that I loved as a kid was Roller Coaster Tycoon, and there was an open version that I did play on Linux for a little bit called OpenRCT 2.
Oh.
And I tried it out. I did have to have the Steam version of the game installed, or maybe not, to run it. But it was a lot of fun, brought back a lot of childhood memories, and I just was like, I'm building me a roller coaster on this son of a gun. So it brought back a lot of fun memories, because I got to tell you, this is a little bit off the cuff, but I started riding roller coasters when I was 5 with my dad, and my mom and I used to spend a lot of time on that game when I was a kid, and this open version of it brought a lot of fun for me this past week, and I said, well, I'm going to check it out. So yeah, that's my 2 cents for this topic.
That's fair. Anybody else? John, I don't know if you had anything. You don't play games.
I really don't. Now the old Atari games. Now that's there we go. The old, like, even Combat or some of those. Those are fun.
Asteroids.
Yeah, Asteroids. Love it.
Pac-Man was one of my favorites, although really looking at it now, it's kind of terrible.
Yeah.
I like Pac-Man. I actually prefer Miss Pac-Man to Pac-Man. I thought that was a little more fun. But yeah. Donkey Kong.
Gotta chase the fruit. Chasing the fruit's fun.
I realized Donkey Kong was ColecoVision, I realized, but same era.
Right, yeah. It worked on the Atari.
Pac-Man made eating disorders cool.
Except for it didn't do bulimia.
Well, I just didn't see that part.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I got on a high enough score to see that part.
Some terminals have Pac-Man while they're updating. Have you seen that? Just go across the screen like this.
Yes. The only redeeming quality of Arch. Well, there's another game I tried. I shouldn't say things like that. I shouldn't poo-poo on somebody else's project. Sorry, Arch. I don't mean to be toxic. There's another game I checked out called Veloren, I think it's called. I may have the name not quite right. But it's a neat game in that it's a multiplayer. I don't know what voxel is, but voxel RPG written in Rust, inspired by games like Cube World, Legends of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Swarf, Fortress, and Minecraft. And I definitely saw the Legend of Zelda and Minecraft cues in it. I had some trouble, actually, it's also in early stages. It's a very neat concept. It's still early stages, which I just said. But the character selection and customization, I think, is pretty cool and so forth. So the worlds look neat, kind of Minecrafty. I don't know if I would like maybe less Minecrafty. I don't know. Maybe it's easier for doing like level building and such. It's a neat game. I hope that they continue developing on it because I think it has a lot of potential. A lot of the scenes look really good. A lot of the play field and whatnot. Kind of got an open world feel, which I know that's how Legend of Zelda is. But and I'm not sure if I like the Minecraftiness of it. It's I guess it is what it is. But nonetheless, it's a very neat thing. I wonder where it's going to go ultimately. It ran great on the Steam Deck, but I did have to use an external keyboard for it because I couldn't get things mapped properly to the gamepad. So anyway,
I have seen that game though.
Yeah.
I have tried it. It was it's early, put it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of good potential in it though. I think their tech base is probably solid. Like their kind of USP there is pretty solid.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that to kind of piggyback on that, that's one of the bigger issues with the open source games. Really, is the effort in making a game is, and it can be pretty crazy, right?
Extraordinary.
If you're making even like a simple game, I think people will be very surprised at how much actually goes into building just even a simple game. Especially if you're building it from your without using a big toolkit like Unity or Unreal or something.
Mhm.
Like if you're using a smaller toolkit or heck even building the tools yourself, that it's a lot of work. Like game developers are some of the most brilliant developers out there, and they the fact that they make fun things out of it doesn't lessen their skill set, certainly. And that's one of the bigger issues I think that I've seen over the last 2 decades. I've looked at open source games where that's the issue, right? Because you're like, why is Super Tux Kart so far behind Mario Kart? Well, it's open source, but they only have so much manpower, but not just the amount of people working on it, but their skill set, their tool set, their all of those things that a bigger company or a bigger studio or something might have, or even an indie studio who might be getting grants from their government to help out with bills, or they're taking on deals from platforms like
Mhm.
Microsoft or Sony or something to help pay for it. And, open source is if it's an open source game, I highly doubt the bigger platforms are going to be like, yeah, let's put money into this that ultimately isn't stuck on our platform, right? So it can be kind of difficult to get resources and talent, and not just developers, but artists or musicians or any of those things. And a lot of those people either don't even know open source exists as a thing, or they just don't. The people that work on them just don't know those people.
So I think I agree with you, and I had thought about this quite a bit through playing different open source games, and I kind of feel like it's as though they have the core mechanics and functions are there, but the polish is just not there. Like the actual finer details that add the character, that make it. I don't want to use the term immersive, but immersive, where you want to really get engaged in the game, like Tux Kart or Super Tux Kart, whatever it's called. Early on, it just didn't feel great, when playing it.
Yeah, it didn't have the momentum. It didn't have the responsiveness.
Right.
It didn't.
And
It didn't react in the way you thought it should, right?
Right.
As a game.
Yep, but that may be coming in with a different expectation. Think of a game like BZ Flag. For anybody that's played that, that's in an open source tank meets kind of Rocket League game, you could say. I mean, the expectation was that it wasn't going to be a AAA game. It was going to be an open source maintained game.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't exist in a vacuum. They exist.
Right.
They exist around all of the other options. And if you have something like Urban Terror, for example, that's using the old Quake 3 engine, it's not that it's a bad game, not that you can't have fun with it. But if you put that next to something like Valorant or Call of Duty Warzone or something like that, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's like, yeah, I'll take the 1999 engine over here. Graphics aside, the game mechanics are not as engaging. The gameplay loop, the psychology of the experience is not there. And that's really it. You can't like we can look at it like give it a break, it's open source, but it doesn't exist out like on its own. Like it's not the only game, then we can't just judge it on its own. It
Right.
has to, you judge it based on what's available.
And I think that what I think is neat though is they're really close to like being there. Like Super Tux Kart today is way better than it was like 4 years ago when I first played it, or whatever. And it's actually really quite good, and the controls are better, the physics are better. They've really kind of dialed it in. And
you can play it online now too with other
Right.
friends and family.
Right. And I think it's telling that, something when you stick with it, what you can do with the game. I think there's a game that I think is really good that I do enjoy playing, and I did not know it was open source when I first played it, but Xenotic. That's a game that I think
It's pretty good, yeah.
that's a really good game that's open source, and it still gets updates because I get, the notifications and from Zipper. And that's a really good game, and I think that's kind of, I think, is should be the gold standard as far as open source games and how much fun they are to play. Now, the problem I have with Xenotic is I'm terrible at first-person shooters, so it's hard for me to ever win. But yeah, it's a really, I think it's a really great game. There's another one that I thought was really awesome too. Actually, I like Extreme Tux Racer. I don't know if it's an old one. You're a penguin.
That's where he's like sliding down the hill or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's still fun to play, and my kids still like playing that. I don't have to play it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's not to say that these games are inherently bad. Like they're not objectively like terrible games, right? They're not ET. They're not, these awful games. Yeah, I'm saying it.
That really hurts when you say that.
It's okay. I meant for it to. No, but like they're not inherently like awful, objectively terrible games, right? But like if you're trying to get people interested in making free and open source games, it's almost like the people, and this is totally conjecture from my perspective. It's like the people who make free and open source games were already interested in free and open source stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the games being what they are, not necessarily graphically simple or whatever, but like you had said, they miss that little polish, right? They miss the little details that like just make it feel great, right? And when comparing, the free and open source game to something equivalent from not even a AAA studio, but like an indie studio or just like maybe a AA studio at best, like those games always feel and look better, and they're getting the attention. They're getting the "What's up, it's your boy" YouTubers. They're getting the IGNs and the Game Facts folks talking about them, and the open source ones aren't. And that's kind of the problem, is like how you can't get more people to work on the game because it's open source. Like anyone can, presumably like contribute, and if the project takes it or whatever, but you can't get them there if when they boot up the game it's Billiards from 2003, right? Like you can't, you're not gonna get people like on board when they're doing that, right? So it's kind of this weird thing. Like you have to put in the effort, but it's hard to get the thing dialed. Like you said, Super Tux Kart came out forever ago, and it's gotten better, but you look at it next to Mario Kart 8 and people are like, what have these guys been doing? And I mean, whether or not that criticism is valid or not, it's not the point, but that is the criticism that would be levied, right? They're like, this looks like Mario Kart 64, and maybe for some retro perspective it's like, hey, this is like a flashback kind of thing or whatever, but you have to find a way to get people who are not thinking about open source and not thinking about free software or whatever. You have to get them interested in your stuff first, and then like, hey, by the way, this thing you've been working on, open source, you can work on it too. You've been playing this game, like, why don't you work on it too? And they'll probably be like, oh, you mean mods? And like, no, I mean the actual game, right? And so that can be empowering to some people, but you got to get them to that point, and that's the difficult, right? That's the difficulty, is when they if they see Minecraft that has the mind share that, like, the best selling game of all time, and then you have Mind Test. It's like, Mind Test is not an awful game, but most people don't even know it's there. They only find out because they don't want to pay $30 for Minecraft, and they find this thing, it's close enough, and I'll take it, right? But they don't even know that it's open source or whatever. They don't care about that. You have to find a way to like get people into that mindset of like thinking about the fact that it's open source, the fact that it's, you can modify it and all these things in a way that you want, and not just the way the developers allow, and that it's tough. I'm not saying I have an answer. I'm just saying that's kind of what needs to happen.
I kind of wonder if maybe the reason that there's not the time and care put into it is because there's no real financial incentive to do so.
Well, not only that, it's these people that make open source games and other projects, they have other jobs and families and stuff like that too.
Right.
So their time might be limited on how much they can spend with it.
Right. And it's an entertainment thing on top of that. Now,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was just going to say about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Anything? Go ahead.
no, you're fine. So like even we often complain, and I don't mean that totally negatively, but we harp on open source projects that they lack polish, productivity apps. And those are things that people are in and using all the time. I've heard many complaints toward, KDE Plasma for one thing or another. I mean, I've levied many myself, and I like it, but that's also another open source project, and would I rather people put time and effort toward a productivity app versus a game? Probably more productivity. But I do wonder if maybe the lack of some sort of financial incentive is really the kind of the hang up for open source games. Now, some of them have Patreons and whatnot, but I don't see.
And also, I find one more issue is like most of these games are developed by teams in companies, and there's like a proper, like, I think there's a plan. I don't know how these companies work, but there should be a plan about a vision about what the game is, and there's a coherent work being done by many people in parallel to achieve that. But
there's an entire like pre-production and like design documents and all this stuff that gets like before any code or any model is built or anything like that. There's a whole lot that goes into it before.
Right.
So, but the thing is, like most open source projects, again, are done by people across several time zones, having a common interest, and mostly through Git or other version control systems. And it's like, we don't, like people working in open source projects don't meet on Zoom to do a planning or whatever. They just do Git commits. Like that's how the communication goes. And maybe they have like a group chat or whatever forum or wherever IRC matrix, wherever they communicate. But that's it. Like most of the communication in open source is through text. And
that can certainly make it hard.
Yeah, it's like to have like a game which needs several people and planning. Like again, Adam knows better than me, and he told us the details. Like it's very hard to achieve that in open source. And this comes from my limited experience contributing to open source, but the way it works is not like Zoom meetings, like what we do in companies. Like in companies, you have actual physical meetings, or if you're working remote, you have like half your time goes in meetings. Again, you guys all work, so you guys know.
Yeah.
So that, but especially for games, like if you're doing some Arch or GNOME or whatever development, that's probably fine. You don't need that many meetings. You can just do Git commits or raise issues and communicate that way. But a game is a different beast.
Yeah, from what I understand, many games are kind of like batteries, right? Like you're charging a battery in your phone, right? Let's say you got like a really high wattage charger. Well, you can go from 0 to 60% in like 30 minutes, right? And then from 60 to 80 takes another 40 minutes. It's like, well, I did a whole lot more in 30 minutes than I did in these last 40 minutes. And then that last like 20% or whatever takes a really long time. And that's kind of how it goes, is like, building out the game and building out, the game world and the assets and other things. That tends to go pretty quickly for a lot of games. But then like getting that last little bit can take an exceptionally long time. And sometimes you're like 3/4 of the way through the game and you're like, wow, this just doesn't work. I have to start over. And like that happens a lot. Where like I thought this was going to work out, we built all this stuff. Turns out doesn't play great, or this concept really isn't actually fun. So let's start over. That happens quite a bit. But like you were talking about the polish, Nate, like that's the hard part.
Mhm.
Like a lot of nerds, get whether they have ADHD or not, but like they like to build the thing, but like doing that really like annoying like little bug fixing and all the extra stuff that goes at the very end, like that can be demoralizing. And like you said, if there's no financial incentive, like then there's really like you get less and less motivation to keep doing the little bits, because like, oh well, I fixed this bug, but it took me like a week to track down what was actually doing it. So it's like I got one thing done all week, that kind of thing. And so doing a lot of that can take time. If you have, like Sravan said, a huge team, and like you have all these like kind of lines of communication or easy collaboration, lots of meetings, then it can be fairly easy to track down these things, and multiple people do it, so it shortens the time. But if it's just one or two or three or four people, especially over Git commits and maybe a Slack channel or two, that can take forever, right?
Right.
So sometimes you're just like, well, it's like 85% of the way there. That's good enough. And then you
also
come back to it when you can.
One more thing about open source is, like, as Adam said, like the final 10%. It's like building new stuff is good. Like, especially, again, looking from a distro point of view, we at EndeavorOS don't like to add new features, because new features means more testing and then more maintenance. So most of the time, like in most open source projects, goes to just maintain stuff, like to make sure it works for a year or 2 years or 3 years, because you find out that stuff doesn't work after 4 months due to some random reason.
Feature creep
it.
is a problem. Yeah.
Like you can't even prepare for it. It's like random stuff which just pops out of nowhere. And maintaining stuff is where the most energy goes. And again, if the developer is not interested in that, then it's like, especially in a game where you're 95%, as Adam says, you can't finish the game. Okay, you will be like really disappointed in that game.
Yeah, but also like the developer might be like, you know what? Like I've had my fun. I got 85% of the way there. It's open source. Someone else will come along and take care of the other, 10%. And like that, and then of course, you just have to hope that somebody does or whatever, right? And like it's open source, so it's nice that you're able to, right? It's not like, any number of modern game where it's like, yeah, we tried, sorry. Like, I'm glad you guys spent $70 on it, but we're dumping it out, like, it's not that. You can actually, go in and fix things if you want, if it's open source, right? But it really can be a lot. And that last little bit is really difficult to get right. And it's a moving target, because like I said, the games don't exist in a vacuum. Like if Super Tux Kart 10 years ago, if the guy was just like, yep, I think it's good enough, right? Then we wouldn't have what we have now in the game. The graphics are much better, the physics are better and all that. But when you think like it took them like how many years to get it to this point? Well, it's because it's a lot of little work, right? Anybody who's worked on any piece of software or any kind of complex system at all doesn't even have to necessarily be, software. It could be a mechanical system or something. You eventually realize like, man, it's almost there, but like there's these little things that just aren't quite right. And you can't let those little things go, because then it's like, well, this thing doesn't work like it's supposed to. It doesn't do everything it's supposed to, the way it's supposed to. But if you don't have the financial incentive, if you don't have the I don't know, any kind of whatever the incentive, right? Yeah, yeah, right. You have to have something to like motivate you to do the hard part. Because like building up, like a lot of distros, right? Like distros get built and it's like, yeah, this was cool, but like there's these bugs, there's these issues or whatever. And that's a lot of work to get like the little bits of polish. That's why the main distros like Debian, Ubuntu, SUSE, Fedora, they're big teams, right? Like they're fairly large teams. And the smaller teams just don't have either the talent, the time, the effort, and like that last little bit is so important, but it's also the hardest. Like getting something built is fairly simple and straightforward, but getting that last bit is really difficult. And I feel for the projects, I do. And it's like they are doing amazing work for what they have, what the resources they have, the time they have, the talent they have. But they don't exist on their own. And sorry, like Super Tux Kart, as awesome as it is, it's not Mario Kart 8, right?
Right.
It's not even Crash Team Racing.
Well,
Okay, I'm sorry. It's not even Diddy Kong Racing. There we go.
okay.
But yeah, it's it's better than Crash Team Racing. Crash is awful. CTR is awful.
I just don't know. We're all obviously fans of open source. I don't know if gaming is a great industry that open source lends itself to. Maybe just because I'm not a gamer, I don't know. But like, I just think of some of the great open source projects over the years. A lot of them sprung up because someone had to accomplish something at work, and a tool didn't exist for it, and so they write a single, a special purpose tool. And then you look at that and say, well, am I going to turn this into commercial software? No, probably not. So I'll just release it. And then somebody else takes it and adds, I mean, gaming, like what Nathan was saying, it's leisure time, it's I don't know, entertainment. So, I mean, not to say it doesn't have value. It does. I mean, it's a huge, huge industry, right? But is it a huge industry without that financial incentive? I'm not sure it is. In the same way that other type of software in open source, is ultimately taking over everything, really.
It's interesting because we're looking at it from a perspective of like modern gaming and such, but back in like Commodore 64 and Amiga time, the Atari ST, like all that, the financial incentive was what? Putting your floppy drive, if a floppy disk of your homebrew stuff in a plastic bag and putting it on a pin board at the local shop, right? Yeah, like there we go. I had to give you an excuse to bring it up. Like back then, like what was your financial incentive? I'm gonna get $20 this month because somebody just thought that my Ultima ripoff was pretty cool. Like that's how it was back then. And like now, because gaming is the biggest entertainment industry at all, it's like, man, how can I possibly compete with the millions or billions of dollars that Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft have, or Valve or whoever, right? And it's like, yeah, you can't, but there's a market for you anyway. But there's always been like this group, this fairly large group of people who are just fine with like homebrew and this random stuff people made. And if they're open source, awesome. But no, I totally get you that like apps and stuff were built like, hey, see a need, fill a need, and just happen to make it open source, right? But yeah, games are definitely kind of hard to fit into that. You're right.
I think you're still going to see some of those, like kind of the world you were talking about. Remember back then, that was still a very tiny world. Yeah, you weren't competing against these giant game developers because they didn't exist back then. Correct, but you were still talking about a tiny percentage of people that were even into computers and knew any of that stuff. You know what I mean? There wasn't much. You're right, not much market back then either. But you're always that's kind of what the open source games though are relegated to now, and probably will continue to be. It's a college kid writing one to see if he can, or to test out game engine idea, that's the kind of stuff I think we're going to get. And yeah, you're not going to get that AAA quality out of something like that, and not sure we need to.
I'm going to spend about 5 more minutes on this before we move on. But I did want to bring something up about open source games that I think is actually a huge plus. So commercial games that are later open sourced, where the core of it is, but not necessarily the assets are, that is a way that a lot of these older games actually stay alive. And I'm thinking in my mind, Doom, Descent, Heretic from the 90s, Free Space, and those also been open source, the game engines and whatnot. And I think, they're really old, and since they were open sourced, in a way that they're now preserved because of that open source.
Mm-hmm.
I love that aspect. That is an amazing thing.
So I can go on GOG and I can buy, Descent and install it, Descent 1 or 2, and then I can install it using the I think it's like DX Rebirth or D2 Rebirth, D1 Rebirth, something like that. And it's actually a better gaming experience playing the exact same levels, but they've improved certain aspects of it so that they have like more dynamic lighting and so forth. And so
Yeah,
it's actually
GZ Doom, right?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, and it's a better game now because of open source. So I wonder if maybe it's the art aspect or the creative core piece of it, the story and the character or whatever that's sometimes lacking in open source games. And I wonder if maybe that's because there's no protected IP, so it's not something that's owned and actually protected by somebody and given value. Like I
Or
wonder if
because
that,
the people who are making the game are not writers, they're not artists, they're not, like those are totally separate skill sets that I'm not saying they aren't, but like possibly, right?
possibly.
A lot of times that is the case. Like, and the other thing that comes up with old engines that get open sourced is you end up with fans of those games that are good at making new games out of old engines. If you dive
Ion
in,
Fury.
if you dive into the Sonic fan game community, which is where I kind of got my start when I've got my first computer, this guys at Sonic Fan Games HQ are still making, it's like fanfics for gamers. It's
Right.
kind of funny, but there's other games that are being made on very similar engines, and that's actually where Christian Whitehead, who made Sonic Mania, started out. He was a contemporary of mine, if you will, of the late 90s and 2000s, and he was just making fan games. And then one day he's like, I'm gonna rewrite Sonic CD and see, and he did, and now he's at the point where he is as a well-known developer, and Sega paid him a bunch of money to make probably the best installment of Sonic games to date, Sonic Mania. So
part of all this is, so these larger companies, the reason they can't open source their games, even if they wanted to, is because how do you want to get your game into the hands of the most possible people? The easiest way is to put it on a console, because how many people have an Xbox or PlayStation or Switch? And the APIs that they have to use in order to put it on that console are proprietary, because the game console creators make not just the hardware, but also the operating system or firmware proprietary. So they can't expose that. But because of that, they have access to that API. They can put that game on that console. So they can reach the most number of people, make the most money. These people who are making open source games, they're not targeting consoles very often. They're targeting PC. There might be Mind Test on Xbox. I'm not sure, but I find
doubt
that
it.
unlikely. Typically, what you'll find is they're targeting PC, and PC, the APIs at least have to be known. You don't necessarily need to know how they work. You just need to know what the API is and how to work with it. So because of that, you can make open source games for PC, not necessarily for a console. And that's part of the reason why also, look at, for instance, I know it's not open source, but Minecraft. You make Minecraft for PC. Okay, you could make that open source if you wanted to, but then you have to go and rewrite it essentially for whatever console you want to target, and that console port has to be proprietary because of that API. So because of that rewrite, it takes time. That's why either the console port comes out after the PC or the PC port comes after the console, because you have to rewrite it.
That's very true.
I think a lot of those APIs can be swapped out. I mean, basically, Xbox and PlayStation are just neutered PCs at this point. I mean, they're not nothing.
The thing is, hardware-wise, yes, but software-wise, it's a little bit more flexible than that, because an Xbox, it's essentially running neutered Windows. The original Xbox, they were going to name it the Direct Xbox because it was Windows NT running DirectX and like a custom UI, and that was about it.
I mean,
Which,
Dreamcast was Windows CE.
Right.
Which, by the way, the original Xbox UI, I still think is the best, and they should go back to that.
But PlayStation and the Switch are both running BSD-based operating systems, If you look at it in the open source licenses, because they actually have to tell you all this when they use open source stuff, you can see that they're using, I believe it's the FreeBSD kernel in the Switch OS. So yeah, they're still using open source stuff. But porting something from Switch to Xbox is not a trivial task. And also doing it backwards. But I bet you what they do is these companies that are making these games, they have their engine, but there's probably different libraries that can plug in that where all the functions have the same name but work differently. And the different libraries that they plug in, they have one set of libraries for Windows and another set for Xbox and a third for PlayStation and so on and so forth. And that's how they're able to quickly go from making the game for one console to making the game for another console. They just got to fix whatever bugs crop up, essentially. Yeah. And when they're going from console to PC, maybe even add like extra graphical settings.
Yeah, that's one of those things with Unreal Engine. Even though you pay a license for it, and I don't think it's terribly expensive because a lot of games use it. But yeah, it's on every system, and it's probably one of the most widely used engines that's out there. They have so much stuff that they've already done for you. Like, why wouldn't you, as a developer trying to reach the highest number of people possible, use something like that? Makes sense to me.
All right. Well, I don't want to go too much longer on this because got other things I want to talk about too. But anyway, so how did what do you think about the open source games, like overall? Do you think was it a fun thing to kind of a fun bunny trail to go down?
I think it's fun.
It was all right.
Especially if you're looking for games for young children, you don't want to spend a lot. So go ahead, give them the open source games. They can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I'm like a child, so I like a lot of them. Well, I hope that they continue, like some of these that have a lot of potential. I hope they continue to be worked on and so forth, because I think it's good to have open source avenues for artistic expression, storytelling, and so forth. So I hope that continues. All right, so next week we are going to have a news flight, our 7th news flight here on the Linux Saloon. So if there's any news topics, and you can email them to me. Anything you want at cubiclenight.com or linuxsaloon.com, doesn't matter. Just suggestions would be great. In 2 weeks, I had this idea of doing, actually someone else had an idea. So I'd like to put in the schedule a terminal application party. I don't know if that interests people, but maybe like your favorite terminal applications. You want to bring those up? I'm just going to see, I'm going to feel this thing out, see how it goes. So if you have some cool terminal applications that you think the community should try, do send me a message like on Telegram or Discord, Matrix, I don't care, someplace. Email me at cubiclenight.com if you have any terminal applications you would like us to try out. And that'll be in 2 weeks on the 24th of September. All right. So now it's time to muddle our way through the Linux news. As always, a big thanks to Michael of This Week in Linux for mixing up a great flight of topics. And I have some distro news. I'm sure everybody is excited about this, and it's already a huge buzz. But Linux from Scratch 11.2 has been released. So who's excited about that? John, I can see the smile on your face of excitement.
Sravan? Memory. So I actually have done Linux from scratch. This would have been probably in the late 90s, 98, 99, or maybe even 2000. I don't know, whenever it first started. But it was, so when I did it, it was before they even had the scripts to do it. It was not, there was no, I mean, you had to bootstrap your own compiler, and from ground zero. Took me weeks to do it the first time. Downloading everything over dial-up connection. Yeah, not a joke. It was quite a learning experience. That was in my early days of Linux, and well worth it. I mean, not understanding how any of that stuff worked, but now, yeah, I'll just say I'm thankful for distributions, whether it be
stuff for you, huh?
Oh man. Yeah, the whole different world. Back then, literally, if you could, even something like writing you had to write your own X configs for graphics, which you also had to download, and you could break your monitor. You literally, if you got a mode line or something wrong, you could actually permanently damage your monitor, and so you had to be super careful. Anyway, yeah, sorry, bit of nostalgia there when you brought it up.
No, it's good. I think
I have something
yes.
to comment on.
Sure, absolutely, Ben.
I am actually in the process of building 11.2 right now on my laptop.
Really?
No
Good for
joke,
you.
man. I'm doing it, and I gotta tell you, LFS is it's a heck of a lot of work, but
Yeah.
I'm doing it just for fun. So
to do it with a
So-
modem in the 90s has to take incredible discipline and patience that I don't think that I have.
I couldn't believe somebody documented it. One other thing I want to add is you got to understand. I know I sound like an old man here, but there was no such thing as things like GitHub back then, right? So a lot of these tools, you had to find the website if they had one. A lot of times you had to go to like an FTP server to pull down the source code. Everything was config, make config. Yeah. I mean,
Always hit up
even
Fresh
something
Meat.
like GitHub. Yeah.
Source
that
forge.
was back in the real long old days.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, thankfully now we have pre-built systems like Gentoo and Arch and stuff like that, where you can use a pre-built system to build your LFS.
I feel like I say this a lot, but man, what amazes me now, I'm not a huge distro hopper. I like to try out different things when they're new and come out, but I'm just amazed at how good they all are. I mean, even something developed by like one or two people, that they release as a boutique distro, you boot it, everything pretty much works. It looks good. It works well. You can load all your software. I mean, it's pretty amazing that everything just works so well.
It really is. I mean, they take, we really, some of us, we really seem to take for granted everything that these distro developers higher up than someone like me have done, like, Canonical, Debian, all those people. And let's not forget that they started from templates like these LFS things and built them from then on.
I see people complaining about like what icons look like or something, and I think, man, that's we're in some good times if we can complain about that.
Yeah, I mean that's nothing compared to what people go through when they do LFS, for example, because they're just trying to get stuff off the ground.
I wonder how an LCD would react to wrong settings.
That's a good question.
I don't know, but the way, I mean, once they built the mechanism, even on the older, once they built the mechanism to like probe it for its capacity, and that's all, the magic of that is all automatic. And I mean, I think any modern display has that now, and any modern OS knows how to talk to it essentially.
No, but I wonder is, could you take an older computer with a an SVGA into a newer monitor and send it bad config that would cause a CRT to be damaged, but could you damage an LCD in the same way? I'm thinking probably not.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know.
It probably just would say out of range and that'd be it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it would just.
Well, CRT is analog communication. I think the LCD monitors and stuff like that, they're all digital.
Right. I wonder. I think it'd be an interesting experiment just to see.
That is a good question.
I'm sure it'd just be like out of range and that'd be it.
Probably.
So anyway, what I was going to say is this week we saw the release of Linux from scratch 11.2. The LFS release includes updates to GCC 12.2, glibc 12.36, and binutils 2.39. The Linux kernel has also been updated to version 5.19.2, and a lot of changes to the text has been made throughout the books. For any of those that are unfamiliar about the book part, Linux from scratch is much different from an average distro because it's not really a distro. It's more of a guide for building your own Linux system from scratch. For comparison, people say Arch Linux and Gentoo are hard to install, and they can be, but that's Linux from scratch takes that to a whole new level. So most distros can be thought of as like regular cars. Arch you could think of as like a kit car. Gentoo and Slackware are find parts individually for the car. And Linux from scratch is manufacture the parts first and then build the car. If you'd like to learn more about Linux from scratch, I'll have links in the notes, of course. But here you are.
You get the iron and the plastic and you gotta make something out of it.
Right.
Well, I haven't got the itch for Linux from scratch, to be honest.
Maybe someday. Someday when I have the patience. So, John, would you say you have more patience now or more patience in the 90s?
Much less, or
Okay.
or I have no time to do. Back then it was new and something, and I was learning, and it was, now I genuinely use Linux for most of my job, and so I just want things to work.
Right.
Yeah, quickest path to get there.
For sure. So I have some good news. If you are an Ubuntu Unity fan, I don't know if I brought this up. Did I bring this up? That it's now become an official flavor.
Yes.
So if you
that's
want
correct.
to do Ubuntu Unity, you can you can have it as an official flavor starting 22.10.
Oh boy.
Is anybody here going to run that now that it's an official flavor?
Yes.
So
I
yes.
definitely will, Nate. Yeah.
Do you think?
Because hold on,
you-
I just want to say that Unity, as far back as 1404, for me at least, was a heck of a flavor. And when they went back to GNOME, I was like, God darn it. So, I mean, nothing against GNOME, man, but I got to tell you, I still would prefer Unity to be the stock default personally. But that's just me. So, yeah, given they're adding it back as an official version, given to, Rudra's hard work, I got to give props to that kid. Well, I have to say that him and his team are definitely putting some hard labor into that. So I'm glad that they're bringing it back, and I will definitely be checking that out from those guys. So
Hey, I have a question about that. I don't know if anybody knows. So I seem to remember, this is off memory, so I could be way off, but wasn't one of the big things behind Unity, and one of the reasons it was called Unity, that was when, like, around the time of that Ubuntu phone or whatever, and it was gonna be like work on mobile and on desktop and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I'm just curious. I know the UB ports or whatever it's called sort of carried on that Ubuntu phone project. Are they using Unity in that, or did they migrate that to something else?
But they renamed it. So it's complicated and weird, but the best I can describe it is what they're using is what used to be called Unity 8. It is now known as Lomiri. What Ubuntu Unity uses is Unity 7, but they have been actually doing active development on Unity 7, so it's not quite the same. It's got some bug fixes and some other stuff. I don't know exactly what all they've done, but I know there are some bug fixes in there.
But they did indeed start from the same code base, and UBports is still using that.
Unity 7 and Unity 8 are completely different.
They are.
Yeah. So Unity 7 is based on GNOME, uses GTK, whole 9 yards. You've used it before, probably, if you've been in Linux for long enough or used a bunch of Unity. Typical stuff. Unity 8, aka Lomiri, uses Qt, and it's its own thing. It's designed from the ground up to run well on phones and tablets, because GTK does not use the GPU usually nearly as much as Qt does. So what they're trying to do is reduce the load on the CPU and share it more evenly between the two by using Qt instead of GTK.
Qt is that thing Qt is that thing those terrible KDE users like, right? That they use.
Essentially,
I won't say whether or not they like it, but it's definitely what KDE uses.
Essentially, the inevitable future when GTK dies. Yeah.
Oh, good God.
Thanks, Thomas. Sorry to take a rabbit trail there. I was
No, you're
curious.
good. You're good. That's not something that a lot of people know about, honestly. A lot of people don't realize that Unity 7 and Unity 8 are completely different. I learned this by delving into the source code.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Well, I am hoping that Ubuntu Unity does well. I like having alternative desktops available because I think different people like to work different ways, and John, even though you like to work the wrong way, I still appreciate that you work. So
That's right.
I'll definitely be taking a look at that for sure.
Oh, excellent.
I like the heads-up display and the what is it, the global menu that Unity normally comes with is pretty handy, especially within applications, searching and stuff. It's pretty handy. That
I know there are some problems with it. It was almost previously. I don't know what it is now or at this stage, but I'm wondering how well the global menu system will work because that was a technical liability that had to be maintained for that search feature to work. So I don't know what the status of that's going to be. I hope that that's a thing that will work properly again. So yeah, so I guess we'll see what happens there. Maybe some visual updates and so forth will be nice. Will be welcomed, I'm sure. Although I think it looks fine, but some people don't. We're looking forward to seeing that video of yours, Colin, when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and to talk a little bit about Debian again. So it was brought up just ever so slightly, but there's a Debian non-free firmware debate. So Debian does not come with any non-free firmware, but many people love Debian because of this. However, this becomes a problem for anyone who wants to use Debian on newer hardware, whether it's a Wi-Fi card or NVIDIA GPU. With Debian, it is more challenging to get going. There's an unofficial non-free version of Debian that includes non-free, but most users would have no idea that it even exists and would have to play a game of Go Fish to find it. It's in like some wiki pages, not really easily accessible.
So I have a bone to pick with that. And
okay.
You pass this on to the Destination Linux guys too. So yeah, it's not easy to understand, definitely for people. However, the links to the non-free images are literally on the main Debian download page and have been for years. It's right directly under the link where you get Debian. It says there's also these unofficial non-free ones that include non-free firmware, and the link is right there too. For as long as I can remember, that's been on the official Debian download page.
Yeah, in the source link, if you add non-free contribute to the source list for each item, you'll have access to the non-free stuff.
No, but I'm saying if you go to Debian.org, click download, where anyone would do, right on that page, and it's directly under where it says, getting the installers. There's a little section that says other installers, and it says you can get the non-free firmware and everything. So it is actually on the main page, on the main download page. Now, I agree with the whole, non-free to most people, they're probably thinking, oh wait, so if I do this one, I have to pay for it or something. I don't like the terminology. I think that's confusing to people if you're not familiar with open source. But it is right there on the download page.
So what I would say the entire download page has to be redone to be made clear entirely, because they just show the net install, then they give you the checksum signatures, then they have the hybrid. And I mean, even like the hybrid USB stick one is a little bit ambiguous what that means. So it's not very clearly laid out, any of it. So the unofficial installers, non-free firmware, yeah. But I would say,
let's be honest, the whole Debian website, not just the download page, could probably use a little sprucing up. It's very utilitarian.
Right, so the Debian.org page, though, the very first page when you go on there, that looks very nice and modern and friendly. But as soon as you start to dig into it, then it becomes a wall of text. So, but I think they've started. They have started. And I think they just need to continue that. So what do you think of the non-free free version? Like, how do you feel about that? Like, what's...
Well, I think with all the new hardware that's going to be slammed out in the next, let's say, 6 months, and in order to take advantage of it at its fullest, you're going to have to go non-free unless people can just pull firmware out of their hat. because you got your new AM5 architecture coming out. You're going to need firmware for that. You have Intel's thing with their efficiency cores and their power cores. And I don't know how well they've actually got that to work on Linux yet.
I'm pretty sure that'll be baked into the kernel. Like any of the the CPU stuff will be baked into the kernel, I'm sure.
Intel's pretty good. Intel's good about that. Yeah.
It's more the
That's already in
GPU
the
and
kernel.
Wi-Fi, mostly the Wi-Fi, and NVIDIA. Just Wi-Fi and NVIDIA. That's basically the problem.
To date, NVIDIA is not bad on Linux. They've actually got a lot better.
To answer your question, Nathan, I like where they're going. I mean, I've been an avid Debian user for over 20 years, and I can't remember the last time I didn't use the non-free version. I mean, it's habitual. I always use the non-free version. I think most of the Debian users I know use the non-free version. Once you learn about it, that's what you use because it's so easy.
Right.
Yeah.
To add to that, Nate, I always use the non-free ISO myself when I install vanilla Debian, and I've never had any problems except for on this Lenovo Legion gaming laptop next to me. It's running a more modern set of hardware, and I had to install the higher than 5.10 kernels through backports, but after that, it was all fine. And, everything's hunky-dory after that. So there's no problems there. And, and the problem with the stock 5.10 kernel is I have to plug in my mouse from this computer I'm on right now. But that's a temporary gripe. That's nothing major. So.
The one question I have about this is if they do put the non-free firmware in an ISO like this by default, like they're talking about, will an ISO continue to be available that doesn't have any of those proprietary non-free blobs? Because if they keep doing that, where there's that completely open source ISO and the ISO with the non-free firmware, I have no problem with it. That way, if somebody wants a completely open source system, they can. But if somebody needs that non-free firmware or drivers, that's completely there and available to them. They just need to make sure that they are clear which one is which.
Couldn't they just have a unified ISO and then you just tick a box saying, do you want the proprietary pieces?
That's what most of the others have done.
And you're offline.
That's what most of the others have done that.
If you're installing and you're offline, what that requires you to do is you need to have those packages that are non-free readily available. Otherwise, you can download them from the internet. But we're not quite at the point yet where we can just assume that somebody will already be on the internet as soon as they install or installing an operating system. Like, it's kind of safe to assume that the first thing somebody does once they boot up an OS from a flash drive is connected to Wi-Fi. Or if you're on a desktop, that it might be hooked up via Ethernet. But all too often, especially if you're not going to be bothering with network related stuff at all, you may not get on the internet. You may just dink around.
But even right now, the non-free ISOs of Debian already have the firmware built into it, so you don't have to have an internet connection. So that's what I mean. I don't see anything that precludes them from just making a decision.
And that's why I say we shouldn't have a unified ISO. We should have two separate ones, one with the non-free, one without. That way, if you need it, it's on the ISO, it's there, and it works. Even if you're
I'm a believer in simplifying it.
The last time I did a net install, it actually asked me if I had a USB with the firmware on it. Install it now. So I plugged it in now, and it went and it got a non-free firmware that was downloaded from some Debian website that has it, and took the drivers it needed to run the machine.
Oh, that's nice. Well,
there's a package that's got a bunch of firmware for Intel and a bunch of firmware for this and a bunch of firmware for that that's non-free.
So the last time I thought about the free and non-free is when I was installing Mandrake, and whether they had the non-free CD. So all the non-free stuff was on its own separate CD. And I still have the USB with the firmware on it. It's got stuff on it like AMD microcode and Intel microcode and firmware for this and Broadcom firmware. And You said firmware?
That's how you
kinds of
do it.
firmware.
If you use the vanilla Debian ISO, then yeah, you have to load the firmware separately. If you use the non-free or the firmware ISO, then it's all built in and it works just like any other distro. I think if they want to be user friendly, and I say this as a fan of Debian, I like it. I've used it for years, but really the ship has sailed. If you want to be user friendly, do it the way Ubuntu and Fedora and all the others are doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah, make a checkbox. Great. Say, hey, I'm rigidly free and I don't want any non-free stuff. Uncheck the box, and I'd even say default it to on. You know, don't even make them check a box and say, do you want non-free stuff? Because so many pieces of equipment now have those binary blobs that are non-free. It's hard to get a lot of things to work if you're not loading those things automatically. And I'd like to see them do it. I think they should just load them.
So here's a question. I was looking at Phoronix, and they have an article here that says that they are pulling an NVIDIA binary driver package to provide security fixes. And we know from what I understand, NVIDIA's binaries are not open source, right?
Correct.
Would that affect any of this, or is there an exception for security stuff? I don't know. I'm asking the question because I don't know. So
I don't have the answer to that.
Don't know it. Yeah. I mean, I think in theory it is a security issue. You know, it gets into a trust issue. Do you trust the manufacturer of the hardware and the firmware and what they're putting in it? And there's been a lot of bad stuff. Just look no further than things like Intel, AMT. You know, there's been all kinds of crazy and Intel is considered very Linux friendly, but over the years there's been tons of backdoors and stuff and exploits for that is all in firmware, and there's no way to turn it off.
Well, about 6 months ago, I got an update. Matter of fact, it wasn't even 6 months ago. It's probably more like 4. When I was running the updates, it stopped. It wanted the machine to actually uninstall the NVIDIA 460 drivers and install the 470 ones. And it said that the 460 ones are no longer supported. So I had to go through this stuff and click the OK, yes, and the terminal box and stuff like that. And it automatically ripped out the 460 drivers and put in the 470 ones. And I didn't really have a choice other than stop the updates.
There is 3 proposals. I don't know. I left a link in the chat there to its FOSS. There's 3 proposals that they're looking at for the Debian installer. There's a lot of options that they're going to be throwing up and trying to figure out which is the best one to go with. So that'll be interesting to see which one they select, to be honest. Because I was so inspired by the lack of transparency for download on the Debian website. I actually made a tab for Debian only on my Wix website to actually find the what you're looking for Debian so much easier. I have put it on video a couple of times, but it just makes it easier. It makes it easier for me to find it as well.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm ashamed to admit it. Like I said, been using Debian forever, but if I haven't set something up, and most of my stuff is done with automation, so I really only get into that maybe every 2-3 years. And if I haven't set it up in a while, it always takes me a while to dig through and find what I'm looking for too. So they have not made that an easy process.
It is that time, closing time, and I'd like to. I want to thank you all for being here. We don't want a copyright strike, so please don't do that. We wouldn't get a copyright strike for that, I don't think. Coming up next week, remember we're going to have a news flight night. Tomorrow, Destination Linux will be streaming live in the afternoon at 1 p.m. Mark isn't here, but he has the Atlanta Linux Enthusiast Group. I joined them last week. It was a lot of fun. Really interesting folks to talk to on there. So if you have any questions, it could be about Linux. It can be about, we actually started talking about chicken training, like housebreaking a chicken. It was really, really kind of bizarre. And I had a lot of fun doing that. So check out the Atlanta Linux Enthusiast Group.
The yoke is on you.
Yes. Steve's very own, he usually streams on Sunday mornings. I know he's been very busy lately, working like 180 hours a week. So I'm not sure about tomorrow. I think I didn't see a notification that he wasn't doing it tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and say, check it out. at 9 a.m. Eastern. Linux User Space, they're going to release their Clear Linux episode on Monday. So if you remember, we did Clear Linux a couple weeks back here. So you can dovetail your experience that you had personally with Clear Linux, with Linux User Space. Their next episode is a topic-based one, and they have their next text editor series, Emacs. And also they're going to announce their next distro that they will be testing out called Alpine. I'm also on what's that, Colin?
Steve just wrote that he's not streaming
Yeah.
tomorrow.
No Steve tomorrow morning.
Well, Steve, what am I supposed to do at 9 a.m.?
yeah, me too.
Am I just supposed to make pancakes and not watch anything, Steve? This is extremely unfair.
I guess I can bury my camera for the week.
Oh, he just posted it. So, all right, fine, Steve. I guess you're a human and you have to rest. So, all right, fine. I'm on a podcast called Linux Out Loud. And our next episode that'll drop on Wednesday, we talk about problems with being a fanboy/fangirl. So, obviously, Matt is the biggest fanboy on the show, and Wendy and I are perfectly reasonable human beings that don't have any fanboyisms whatsoever, or girlisms. You're going to say something, Sravan? Because you did unmute. Okay, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I was going to say something, but everyone already knows the truth, so there's no need for me to say it.
Well, of course, OpenSUSE is the best, but I mean, I don't have to say that.
I was going to say something about you having a preference for the Commodore 64s, but that the OpenSUSE thing is bigger. Yeah.
Commodore. Everyone should agree the Commodore 64 is the best 8-bit computer. So I don't know what you're talking about there. I kid. Actually, I have lots of different 8-bit things, or a few anyway. If you want more things on me, you can go to cubiclenate.com. I published a couple things there this week. Just kind of finish some stuff off. And the Commodore 64 is a subject of one of them. I got 3 of them back together, so that was fun. Again, next week is our News Flight night, and Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network. Check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank you all for being part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back in a personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yous.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, I never said hi to you, Scrap. Hello.
Good night. Oh god.
Right. I don't have any viable use cases right now, mainly because I live in a Microsoft world. But sorry, I thought I was muted.
Oh, you muted yourself, Bill.
I keep hitting the same button twice.
You're muted, mate.
Of course. And I thought I unmuted myself. Anyway, yeah.
I like
think-
to answer your question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Go.
No,
Well, if you're
There are
installing-
some options.
If you're
Sorry,
installing,
Thomas. You muted, Nate.
See, I unmuted myself, but I actually muted myself when I was trying to unmute myself. So good job.